I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Jen Briselli. She is Managing Director of Experience Strategy and Design at MadPow. She is one of those brilliant people who just gets it, and gets it so much that she's redesigning meta tiers of what we do, and we'll share a little bit of that thinking with you. So please welcome Jen.
Thank you, Amy, and hello, everyone. I just want to let you know that I am keenly aware of how little stands between you and the cocktail hour. So I will keep that in mind. But as Amy mentioned, she's asked me to talk to you guys about interactive journey maps, because in my role at MadPow, I spend a lot of time arm sleeves rolled up, knee deep in journey mapping and experience strategy deliverables of that type. And so in terms of what I want to share with you today, it's really not meant to be a here's how awesome we are, here's how cool everything is around experience design, but actually meant to be more of an invitation. So by the end of this talk, roughly 10 minutes from now, I'm hoping that wheels will be turning and you'll be thinking to yourself, this is something that we're already doing, but I'd love to think about it differently. Or actually, Jen, what you're doing is totally dumb and I have an even better way to do it. One way or another, I'm hoping that every one of you feels like you want to come up and talk to me at the cocktail hour is what I'm getting at. Okay, so as I mentioned, I want to talk to you about journey maps. And actually, a couple years ago, I probably would have had to stop and really take the time to explain to you what a journey map is. I know there are plenty of you in the room who I might still need to do that a little, and I will, but I'm actually really excited to think about how many times, even over the course of today, I heard people mention experience journey mapping or service blueprinting or other types of methods that go along with experience design and strategy. So I want to start then with a story rather than an explanation. A couple of weeks ago, I was making plans with a friend of mine to go somewhere that neither of us had ever been. And we were going to meet there. And she said, how are you going to get there? And I said, I have no idea. I'll just Google it, and I'll follow Google's directions. This is when I learned that she still uses MapQuest. How many of you knew that MapQuest even still existed? Yeah, so she's not actually printing them out anymore. That would have been even better. But she is going to MapQuest's website and using it to generate turn-by-turn directions. And in essence, it got me thinking about how differently she and I use interactive mapping software and apps. So I'm using Google, to give me directions, but she's really just using her MapQuest as a replacement for somebody sitting in the passenger seat providing directions, as a replacement for a navigator, and that's it. Whereas for me, when I think about Google, I'm really thinking about the mapping functionality almost as totally secondary at this point, maybe even tertiary. Really, if you think about all the other things that Google Maps does, it's well beyond giving me navigation. It helps me know where I can go along the way. So the function, if you've never used it, I just learned about it about a year ago, search along route. If I'm on the way to somewhere, I can find a Starbucks or a gas station along the way. It's actually helping me decide where to go, not just how to get there. Or all the information that it provides me about a destination. There are a lot of times where I want to know if something's going to be open. I actually will just go to Google Maps and look at the hours listed there rather than navigate to that business's website and find where they've got their hours listed. I don't always trust it all the way implicitly. Sometimes I'll double check. But if you think about what you use something like Google Maps for, the mapping part of it is almost like an afterthought because of all the other ways that interactivity is enhancing what it does for you. So I want to talk a little bit about journey maps in this same way. And before I get into that, I actually want to revisit just what I mean when I talk about a map and all the things that maps do for us. So maps do a lot of things, right? The earliest maps helped us understand where we are. That's all they meant to do, was show us where's the lay of the land where we find ourselves today. Maps also help us understand where we're trying to go, especially if it's a place that's unfamiliar or we've never visited before. So they help us learn about a future destination, whether it's physical or chronological. Maps also help us plan the route to get there. So if we're thinking about where we are and we're thinking about where we want to go, they also help us identify the different paths we can take to get to that future destination. And when we're actually on the road, they can help us navigate and change course if needed, right? So maps do all these things. Journey maps do too. And experience journey maps help us map out current and future customer experiences and help us get from current to future state. Interactivity, just like with Google Maps, can help us do this even better. Now, just to be really clear, for anybody in the room who probably wouldn't want to admit out loud in a room full of people who are talking about experience design that they don't really know what a journey map is. Basically, an experience journey map is just a visualization of an experience, and you can layer all different types of information on top of it. So there are a lot of variations out there and a lot of different terms, and we can argue about semantics at the cocktail hour if you want. But in essence, they usually include the experience steps or actions or tasks that take place over time. And often they include qualitative information about the emotional experience, what someone's thinking and feeling, pain points, frustrations, delights, opportunities. Sometimes we can also add in information about things that are going on behind the scenes in terms of employees or staff, data and tech and operational infrastructure that give rise to that experience. So you can do a lot. You can create a lot of different types of journey maps. But when I say journey map, I just mean at its broadest sense a visualization of an experience. And we can use it to do all those things that I mentioned before about maps in general. I also want to mention what I mean when I talk about interactivity, to make sure we're very clear about this. So in the olden days, when newspapers were just moving into digital, they became interactive, and I put that in quotes because really all they were doing was taking something that was in print and making it available on a screen. And that was the definition of creating this online digital, et cetera. And that's not what I mean by interactivity. So when I talk about making something interactive, I don't mean taking what would normally be a static print artifact and just putting it in a digital form. Maybe it's a little easier to share. Sure, you can view it on a screen, but that's not what I mean. I mean something more like this. So if you think now to modern day interactive journalism and storytelling, there's some really cool stuff out there that is using interactivity to enhance how you make meaning of what's there. This is just from a story about CTE, head injuries in the NFL. And I remember reading this, and yeah, you can find the print version or read it in a static form on a screen. It's got all the right information, it's compelling, interesting story, but the interactive version of it on the right really made use of interactivity to enhance the experience of reading and learning. It did some cool stuff with highlighting different brains of different players and their positions and how long they were in the league and how old they were when they died, and showing that interactivity and which brains lit up and so forth helped me make sense of the information in a much more compelling and, I think, powerful way than if I had just read this on a screen. So when I talk about interactive journey maps, this is what I mean. And I want to talk about interactive journey maps with you because at MadPow, this is a place we've been playing a lot lately. And it's new for us. And frankly, I think it's new for everybody. So in the spirit of learning and sharing, we want to share with you some of what we've learned over the last, I want to say year at this point, maybe a little more. But also invite you to share what you might have, hopefully after this talk, or tomorrow, or the next day. So what I'm going to do is give you two quick examples of places where we did end up creating an interactive experience journey map and what we learned from it. So the first was with a financial services company that asked us to help them redesign a pretty large portion of their business. And we basically did a whole lot of work to come up with an experience strategy around how they can deliver pretty much a radically new and innovative experience for their customers. And I'm keeping this in very broad strokes. So it's really less about what we did and more about the output that we came up with, at least for our chat right now. And over the course of this project, we did quite a lot of work, right? So here's the really quick fast-forwarded version. If this were like a movie, it'd be like music montage, boom, boom, boom. But we did a whole bunch of research. We created a whole bunch of intermediate artifacts, if you will, things along the way like identifying design principles and behavior change design principles and other types of artifacts that helped internalize and share and socialize the vision. And we did produce a journey map that was meant to be an ideal future state vision of what this huge holistic end-to-end customer experience would be like. And this incorporated a whole lot of different parts of the business, different employees in different roles, as well as different customers in different situations. Now, that journey map incorporated a lot of what we called key moments or core concepts that were designed to identify these really important moments in time where the organization could step in and provide something, whether it was to provide an unexpected benefit to delight or even to just preempt a problem before it became a problem. And there were a lot of these because this was a huge, hefty, complex scenario that we were mapping. So when we put all these together into a journey map to put down the customer experience, the digital interactions, the human interactions, and the behind-the-scenes things that were all happening. It turned out to be 40 feet long, which is fine. It's kind of cool. I mean, this is my colleague John rolling this out at the print office, and I think he was pretty darn proud that day to realize how big that was. But when you think about its usability, unless you have a 40-foot wall in a room where everybody spends all day long, it's not going to be all that useful. And we did actually hang it on a 40-foot wall in one of our conference rooms, and it was actually quite useful because we were able to put Post-its on it and iterate and get feedback and go through a couple revisions, and we did this with the client as well. So in its 40-foot paper-long form, it was useful as an iterative part of the process, but in terms of how we wanted to deliver it, we realized it needed to be interactive. So we did. We put it into an interactive form, realizing that having it be something that somebody could load on their laptop from anywhere within the organization and basically hop around from parts of the journey map to other parts of the journey map, almost like a choose your own adventure. We could click here and it could take me over there. I could zoom in and deep dive on some of the information. I could back out. And in essence, it gave us the ability to also give some kind of extra information when someone would click on something. Like a key moment in this experience, I get a pop-up and it shows me some recommendations, or maybe the research that supports that moment or that decision or that recommendation. Could be audio visual that actually shows a diary or a selfie or an audio quote of somebody saying why that moment is so important. Or it could be implications for the development team or design guidelines for the UX team. So these things can be held in the context of the journey map with the ability to click and dive deeper. And you can see this. I'm not going to go through it now in too much detail, but we can share this. This is online, and we can find you the link if you want, but it's probably much easier to just find us at the booth, and we'll have it loaded up for you guys to check out. But all this stuff is out there on the web, and we can share it in more detail. But I think what's probably more interesting to you is to hear about what we learned from that. So the first is that doing this kind of thing in this particular example, we realized it does make it more usable so that it's actually easier to navigate and not have to stand in front of something that's 40 feet long. We also found that this was really helpful for this group because teams were distributed and they weren't all in the same place. So it's a good way to make something interactive to share with groups that aren't going to be in the same room. And we also were able to, as I mentioned, put the recommendations and insights in the context of the journey itself. So you're going to build all those layers of information on top of this artifact. What it can't do is do any of that without all the robust research and work that comes ahead of it. So all that stuff I showed you we did had to be part of what went into this map. You can't just start with, I want a journey map, let's make it interactive. You've still got to do all the proper research that we've heard people talking about today to really understand, build empathy, and design what that perfect experience should be. So another quick example, and this one more related to healthcare, was with a large health company who wanted us to evaluate what they were calling a digital health ecosystem that they were thinking about, and then help them define a new experience strategy to help make it real. And when I say ecosystem, this is what they had. It's blurry because obviously you're not allowed to read it, but you kind of don't need to anyway. This is really kind of just an IT diagram. It's not really a patient-centered ecosystem. And also, what does an ecosystem even mean, right? An experience ecosystem, right? We use these maps sometimes in our work, but really an ecosystem is it's just a list, right? It's just an identified map of the players or the things that are in an environment that affect something. And that's great if you're just trying to identify who and what they are. But if it's just that list alone, sometimes it's almost as useful as like a recipe list minus the recipe, or like the parts list at the beginning of your IKEA instructions, right? It's good to know to have it, but you really need to know more about the relationships and what to do with those things to really be able to take any action. So we started this work, we did this exploration. We were looking at ecosystem maps in the very basic sense, identifying all the parts that give rise to an experience for patients who, in this case, were managing multiple conditions. This company wanted to think a lot about all of the things, not just the stuff they control, but all the things, right? I'm thinking of that cartoon, all the things. So the people, doctors, family, caregivers, friends, the devices, smart medicines, wearables, sensors, external things just like the weather or the barometric pressure. And they wanted to figure out how all these things could help give rise to a good patient experience. So we started with ecosystem maps, but then we were thinking, well, we need to know about the relationships between these things. And we also realized as we did that, we were actually creating a journey. We were creating not just an ecosystem map that showed relationships, but still creating a map of how a journey might take place. But in this case, it wasn't linear because it's health related. And there's no beginning and end with health, right? You just manage. And hopefully, you're not just managing passively, you're thriving. So we ended up thinking about an experience in a more circular form. This is a crude early sketch, but the idea was that if somebody is doing well, they're hopefully in an equilibrium, just kind of living through, going through preventative care and doing well. But certainly there are things that will knock you out of equilibrium, and those things are inevitable. So what can we do to get you back quickly into equilibrium? And so without getting into too much detail, we ended up exploring this circular journey map that was a hybrid of an experience journey in circular form and had the ecosystem layered on top of it to show how these things all related. But more importantly than that, and the whole reason I'm showing it is that we realized, oh God, this is going to be hard for someone to engage with. It's kind of a lot of stuff going on. And we wanted to make it interactive so we could add information at different points and say, hey, here's a moment where somebody's going to have an acute episode, an asthma flare-up, a migraine. But are there ways we could preempt that because we know things from the ecosystem? We know the pressure triggers this or the humidity triggers that, and we identify it smartly before it happens. Could we prevent that loop where someone ends up out of equilibrium? So making this interactive was going to be key. So we did a couple ugly versions. We reviewed it with a client. We went through iterations. And we did create a version that looked a little bit nicer, but more importantly was interactive because it gave someone the ability to dive into different places in this experience map and say, okay, at this moment in time, something bad might happen for this patient. Maybe they're about to have a migraine or they're already having a migraine. There's a key opportunity here for us to intervene. What does that intervention look like? And we can provide a deep dive of information when you click on that moment that says, here's what we do, here's why we do it, here's the research that supports it, here's the rationale, the design implications, partnership considerations, tech considerations, et cetera. So we included all of that. And to add on to what we learned about, oops, sorry, my monitor just changed here. Hopefully you guys are still seeing what you should. Good. Certainly, as we found in this one, that these journey maps, when they're made interactive, can help articulate that experience in a really innovative way. The need here was not going to be solved with a linear journey map. And knowing that we could make this interactive allowed us to explore novel forms. So I think that was really valuable. It also can become scalable and editable. So once this is deployed and maybe set up on an internal server, internal teams can add to it and change and put more in the details and take things out and add spots over time where they see new opportunities. It can also help you tie, as I've mentioned, those experience research insights directly into the journey, rather than having all those beautiful research insights end up in a drawer somewhere. They're live in the system, preserved in the context of the experience. But it can't do any of that if it's not shared with the internal client team's workflows involved. So if this is just going to get set up on a server somewhere, no one's going to look at it. So you've got to be doing all this work in partnership and collaboration. So I basically will end with this invitation for you to think a little bit about these, because we're really excited about this work. It's new to us. We've tried to find platforms out there and tools out there that do this well. There are some that do small parts, but we haven't seen any that we think do it really, really, really well. So we're doing it for ourselves. But we invite you to help us, and I would love to chat with you more about it if you think that this is either useful to you or you're doing something similar, or if you have some cool ideas and you just don't know if they'd fit in. Come talk to me about it, come talk to us at the booth about it, or go digging on the web. We've got links to this on the website. But let me know, how can interactivity help you enhance the way that you articulate your customers' experiences? Thank you.